I once stood in an operating room for 17 straight hours, sweat dripping into blood, trying to snatch a man's life back from the edge of death. But that night, a folded note on my kitchen counter killed me in a second. My name is Dr. Andrew Whitaker, 47 years old, neurosurgeon at New York Presbyterian. I thought I understood pain. I've seen spines cracked in half, brains sliced open, patients vanish beneath my hands. But no textbook prepares you for the moment you walk into your own home and realize it's no longer yours. I had just returned from a 3-week trip in Tokyo, a conference, a series of complex surgeries, and a sleep schedule that barely qualified as human. I was exhausted, but there was something sweet about coming home. I pictured it the entire flight. Claire reading on the sofa, Lucas asleep in his room. I'd open the door, drop my suitcase, walk over, wrap my arms around her, and whisper, "I'm home." That never happened. It was 10 p.m. when the taxi dropped me off. The Brooklyn air was sharp. The street was quiet, familiar. My building stood the same, second floor, blue door, 2 steps up. Everything felt normal until it didn't. I reached the door, pulled out my key, and slid it into the lock. It didn't fit. I tried again. No luck. My gut twisted. I looked closer. The lock was new. I knocked. No answer. I called out my wife's name. Silence. I pushed gently. The door opened. Darkness, silence, thick as fog. I turned on the lights, and everything I knew collapsed. No sofa, no dining table, no bookshelf, no wedding photo, no toys, no sign of life. Just dust. Drag marks on the floor where furniture had been hauled away, a shattered photo frame lying face up, cracked like bone, and on the kitchen counter a folded note, "Don't look for me." That was it. No fight, no explanation, no goodbye, just absence, cold and clean. I stood there in the middle of the space we once called home, the space where I watched my son take his first steps, where we planned vacations we never took, argued about groceries, laughed at burnt dinners. Now it was gone, everything. And the man who just saved a life across the world was left standing like a corpse that hadn't realized he was already dead. I don't remember how long I sat there, maybe 10 minutes, maybe hours. No phone rang, no footsteps approached, only the faint buzz of the ceiling light above me. Flickering like it too, didn't understand why I was here, alone, surrounded by the hollow shell of what used to be my life. I stood up like a man who had nothing left to protect. The apartment layout was the same, but everything familiar inside had been ripped away, not stolen, not packed, erased. I walked through each room, living room, empty. Wooden floorboards still carried the dents where our coffee table used to stand. Bedroom walls bore faded outlines from the wedding photo that hung there for years. Lucas's room, his bookshelves were gone, but the outline in the dust was still visible, like a chalk outline at a crime scene. I opened the wardrobe. Claire's clothes were gone. Not even the scent of her perfume lingered. Just one thing remained, a worn white lab coat, mine, from my intern days, folded neatly. Claire used to fold it for me. It was the last thing she ever touched in this house. 3 years ago, when we bought this apartment, we spent the whole summer repainting each room. Claire chose a soft blue for Lucas's walls, said it helped toddlers sleep better. She used to quote pediatric journals like scripture. I believed every word. I remembered the nights she lay curled on the sofa, head on my lap. I pretended to read, but I'd only stroke her hair, thinking, this is it. This is everything I'll ever need. And then, without realizing it, I started vanishing from her world. More surgeries, more conferences, more research, more cities, Tokyo, Zurich, Berlin. Meanwhile, Claire stayed behind, with Lucas, the homework, the school drop-offs, the runny noses, the endless, nameless silences of motherhood. I thought I was helping. I sent money, I sent notes, I wrote "love you" at the end of every email, but what I sent wasn't love. It was proof of effort. Claire never complained. She smiled on video calls, waved at the camera. Lucas waved too. His smiles had become shorter lately, I noticed it, but far too late. I pulled out my phone and called Claire, disconnected. I called again, still dead. I called her sister, no answer. I called her best friend, Anna, line busy. I sent a message, "Where are you? What's going on?" No reply. I logged into our joint bank account, balance 2017s. The transaction history made my stomach twist. Large withdrawals, steady over 2 weeks. I checked our investment portfolio, access denied. I opened the property deed, transfer document, signed 10 days ago, recipient Coleman Properties, LLC. I ran a quick check, no license, no office, a ghost company, everything I'd built. Gone, quietly, deliberately. I rushed next door and knocked on Mrs. Keene's unit, our neighbor since we moved in. She opened slowly. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Andrew, oh my God, you're back? Do you know what happened?" She hesitated. "I saw movers 3 days ago. There was a man, younger, wore a leather jacket, looked like one of those guys in a music video." She bit her lip. "Claire said they were starting a new life." I nodded. "She didn't say where," she added softly. "I thought you already knew." I didn't answer. I didn't know what to say or who to blame. Back in the apartment, I powered on my old laptop. Years ago, I'd set up a backup folder. It stored everything from our shared devices, including Claire's old phone. I found a hidden folder labeled Notes Project, dozens of emails, all sent to one address, jcole@gmail.com. "You make me feel alive again. Andrew's a good man, son, but he lives like a machine. No emotions, no interest. I've tried to stay, but I won't die slowly in silence anymore." I scrolled further. Photos, Claire on a hotel balcony in a silk robe, Claire in a mirror selfie, smudged lipstick, tousled hair, her eyes locked on the man behind the lens. Not me. Plane tickets, 2 passengers. Destination, Bali. Names, Claire Whitaker and Joshua Cole. They were already gone. I clicked on an audio file. File name, voice, 3-M4A. Claire's voice came through, calm, steady, like she was explaining medication side effects to a patient. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I needed to leave, not because you were cruel, but because you were absent." Silence. "I didn't take Lucas to hurt you. I want him to grow up somewhere with laughter." End of recording. I sat motionless, no screaming, no crying, only pressure, heavy, silent, sinking behind my sternum. I stayed in the kitchen all night, didn't eat, didn't move, didn't sleep. Around 5 a.m., the first light bled in through the windows. The apartment, though empty, seemed heavier in the quiet. I looked at the photo frame again. Claire's smile, Lucas's joy, cracked down the middle like a dissected skull. I glanced at my hand, still stained with dried blood from earlier, a small cut. But somehow it hurt more than any injury I'd ever seen. And I've operated on aneurysms thinner than a strand of hair. I've excised tumors the size of a rice grain lodged deep in the brainstem. I've spent hours inside someone else's skull, mapping out how to save their life. But nothing in medicine prepared me for this, the surgical unraveling of my own. I sat on a kitchen chair for hours, staring at the void between 2 walls. That space used to be our dining area, where Claire would set down dinner, where Lucas once stabbed at peas with a fork just to make me laugh, where I leaned over to kiss her shoulder in silence, not knowing it might be the last time. Now it was empty, so cold it hurt my teeth to breathe. I couldn't cry, couldn't sleep. I felt the ache pooling under my ribs like post-op pain that the anesthesia missed. Silent, dull, insistent. I looked at everything I had left. A drained bank account, a deed no longer in my name, a son I had no access to, and a woman I once called my home now tangled in bedsheets with another man I wanted to punch a wall. But I didn't, because I'm a surgeon, and I was trained to keep my hands steady even when my heart's about to collapse. By noon, I got up, showered, shaved. I printed everything I had: emails, photos, audio recordings, bank statements, property records. I placed it all in my old black leather case, the one I used for medical board presentations. But this wasn't medicine. This was something else. This time I wasn't saving a patient. I was dissecting the wreckage of my own life. The law office was on 6th Avenue. I picked them because they'd once represented a physician in a high-profile asset recovery case. They'd won. The consultation room was quiet, glass-walled, sterile. Across from me sat Meredith Stokes, mid-50s, gray hair pulled tight, a face unreadable even under harsh overhead lighting. She didn't flinch when I spoke, didn't interrupt, didn't say, "I'm sorry," or "That's terrible." She just listened, the way I used to listen to heartbeats through a stethoscope, waiting for the hidden murmur. When I finished, she asked only one question: "What exactly do you want to get back?" I didn't hesitate. Everything Claire took, and my right to be a father. She nodded once, no surprise, only motion. "We'll start today." I signed the power of attorney. I handed over every piece of evidence, calmly, clinically, not because I believed in justice. I wasn't naive anymore. I did it because if I spent another night sitting in that gutted apartment, I'd dissolve into someone I wouldn't recognize. I don't trust the system, but I trust procedure. Cold, exact, methodical. This wasn't about vengeance, it was about precision, about holding a scalpel to the part of myself I let rot in silence. Claire had cut me out of her life without anesthesia. Now it was my turn to reclaim what remained of mine. No one ever taught me how to face the woman I once loved. As the defendant, I know how to intubate in under 20 seconds. I know how to remove a brain tumor the size of a lentil without touching a single nerve. I know how to keep a heart beating when everything else says it should stop. But I didn't know how to sit in a courtroom and hear that same woman tell a judge that I was no longer fit to be my son's father. The first week of the lawsuit felt like an open surgery without anesthesia. Everything came out: the asset disclosures, Claire's messages to her lover, the audio recording of her describing the emotional coldness of our marriage, the drained bank accounts, the forged property transfer. I watched each document surface without blinking. No reaction. I've trained my hands not to shake, even when cutting through someone's brain. But inside, I knew I wasn't a doctor anymore. I was a plaintiff. I wasn't a husband anymore. I was a man forced to prove he wasn't a monster. The first mediation meeting. I arrived 30 minutes early. Claire walked in later. Beige coat, hair tied back, small handbag, not the one she used to carry. She didn't greet me, didn't look at me, just sat down. 3 meters across the room, exactly the same distance between 2 parallel OR tables. Her eyes held nothing familiar, not warmth, not anger, just emptiness. Our lawyers began. Meredith, calm, surgical, laid out every piece of evidence. Her voice never rose. She might as well have been reciting a patient's test results. Claire's lawyer didn't deny the affair, the money, or the departure. They reframed it as emotional abandonment, irreparable breakdown, psychological damage accumulated over years. Claire didn't speak. She simply nodded when her lawyer mentioned she lived in emotional isolation for too long. Isolation. In the home I built, working 16-hour shifts. Isolation while I was piecing together brains so she could sleep safely with our child. The mediation collapsed. We moved on to full litigation. The meetings with Meredith turned colder. This wasn't about documents anymore. It became an autopsy of our marriage. Each detail, each memory, each personal dynamic dissected and laid bare. I answered questions I never imagined hearing. When was your last physical intimacy? Did you ever restrict her spending? Have you ever left your son alone while sick? Were you emotionally unavailable? I'm used to dissecting tumors. Now I was dissecting myself. The first court hearing, I wore a gray suit, white shirt, navy tie, nothing flashy, nothing loose, like the man I used to be. Claire sat 2 rows away. I glanced at her, just once. She didn't glance back. They called my name. I stood, walked to the witness stand. Each step felt like entering an OR, without scrubs, without gloves, without a team behind me. Just me and memory. I told them everything. The night I returned home to an empty apartment. The note, "Don't look for me." The sleepless nights tracing what had happened. The digital trail she left behind. Too careless or too confident to hide it all. The courtroom went quiet. Claire lowered her gaze. When I said Lucas's name, her shoulders twitched. Then came the defense. Her lawyer was sharp, fluent. They didn't deny her actions, they just rebranded them. My client didn't disappear, she escaped a marriage that had long since stopped breathing. I didn't respond. I just sat there. Because I knew that might be true. She didn't cheat to destroy me. She cheated because she'd already given up, long before she packed the boxes. Every new session made me feel like I was standing on open nerves. Claire's legal team pushed for majority of shared assets, full custody of Lucas, limited visitation for me, under supervision. I refused. Not for the money, for the boy. I remembered when he once pressed his hand to my chest and asked, "Daddy, why does the heart beat?" I'd explained slowly, carefully. He nodded like he understood the whole world. I couldn't lose that. Couldn't let another man be the one who answered the next question. In our last pre-trial session, Meredith looked at me and asked, "If you had to choose, assets or Lucas?" I didn't need a second. Lucas. I can build my finances again. I can work 20 more years, perform 1,000 more surgeries, buy another house. But I can't grow another Lucas. I can't make another child call me dad with that same pure conviction. I can lose everything else, as long as I don't lose my son's life. That morning, the sky was gray and heavy. It didn't rain, but the air was colder than usual. I arrived at the courthouse early. I carried nothing new, just the same folder of documents, now worn at the corners. Everything the court had already seen. All that remained was this, the judgment. The courtroom looked the same as always, wooden walls, harsh white lights, stiff benches. But today it felt more like a morgue. Claire entered moments later. I saw her in the corner of my eye. Long, ash-colored coat, loose hair, slower steps than usual. For 10 years she walked beside me. Now she sat across from me, back slightly hunched, as if on defense, but eyes steady as stone. Our lawyers were ready. I said nothing to Meredith. There was nothing left to prepare. No more strategies. Only silence before the knife. The judge entered. Everyone rose. He was an older man, bald, with a deep voice that carried no warmth and no judgment. Just wait. After thorough review of all submitted evidence, witness statements, and relevant documentation, my heart slowed. Not the trained heart of a surgeon, but the heart of a father, waiting to hear if he would still be allowed to be one. The court rules that the property located at 3B Brooklyn, New York, shall be returned to the plaintiff, Dr. Andrew Whitaker. No gasps, no movement. I didn't react. The wooden bench beneath my hands felt heavier than it should. Any financial assets withdrawn from joint accounts without authorization will be restored under civil guidelines. Still, I didn't move. It was all coming back, on paper at least. But then came the sentence I knew would split the room in half. Regarding custody of the minor, Lucas Whitaker, primary custody is awarded to the defendant, Mrs. Claire Whitaker. The plaintiff shall retain visitation rights, 2 weekends per month and 1 extended holiday period annually. And just like that, silence. Real silence. I didn't hear the gavel, didn't hear papers shuffling, didn't notice Claire lowering her eyes. Just one sound, deep inside me, collapse. I had won. Assets, the house, restitution, all of it. But I had lost my son. When the judge adjourned, I didn't move right away. I stared at my hands. These were the hands that once held beating hearts, once saved dying strangers. Today, they held nothing. Claire walked past me in the hallway. We looked at each other. No anger, no pity, not even regret. Just two people who had once been everything, now reduced to a court document and a shared silence. She walked away. I didn't stop her, because there was nothing left to ask, nothing left to win. I returned to the apartment, now legally mine. The door creaked open. No one turned on the lights. No soft "Daddy" echoing from the hallway. I walked into Lucas's room. The furniture had been rearranged, wiped clean by order of the court. The drawers were empty, the closet bare. On the floor, a crumpled piece of paper. I picked it up. A drawing. Stick figures. A tall man, a woman, a child holding both their hands. The paper was worn, bent, torn at the edges. I once believed I could teach my son the difference between right and wrong, between strength and surrender, between things that last and things that don't. But maybe what I should have taught him first was this: a heart can break in half, and no court in the world knows how to stitch it back. That night, I sat on the old sofa. No lights on. Outside, it was spring. Inside, it felt like winter. I scrolled through my phone and found an old video. Lucas, 4 years old, scribbling hearts in red crayon, looking up at me. "Daddy, I drew a heart. That's where love lives, right?" I remember replying, "Yes, and hearts beat because love stays." I used to believe that. Now, I wasn't so sure anymore. I don't clearly remember how I lived after the verdict was read. I just remember that day was sunny, one of those sharp, dry winter suns. The sky was a cruel blue, the streets seemed busier than usual, and I, someone who had just won a case, felt completely, terrifyingly empty. The apartment was legally returned to me, old lock, new deed, clear status. But when I stepped inside, the first thing I felt was, I am a stranger in a place that used to be my home. The sofa was still there, the kitchen still intact. Lucas's room still had his old bed and a crooked drawing of the sun hanging on the wall, but everything felt like it had been sanitized, as if someone had wiped away all the human trace from it. The house no longer felt like a home. It felt like a showroom that once had a soul. I didn't turn on the TV, didn't flip on any bright lights. I sat down on the floor, back against the door. I didn't cry, didn't gasp for air, didn't do anything. I just sat there, as if moving might break the memory into irretrievable pieces. In the dark, I imagined Lucas's little footsteps pounding through the living room, him singing the wrong words to "Twinkle, Twinkle," Claire's soft laughter, then silence. I opened my eyes. There was nothing. The first week after the trial, I lived like a man without internal organs. I made coffee each morning, never drank it. I stood in front of the fridge, door wide open, not to take anything, but just to hear the compressor hum, like the last sign of life in this house. I went to sleep without changing clothes, woke up without remembering falling asleep. I didn't call anyone, didn't go back to work. No one asked, and I had no interest in explaining. I started to write, not a journal, not letters, but small fragments of memory, like slices of a CT scan, scattered but real. The day Lucas took his first steps, the first time he called me Dad, but mispronounced it Da. The time I missed his school meeting for an emergency surgery, and Claire quietly said, "It's fine, I'll handle it." I wrote all of them down, no structure, no titles, just dates and one single line at the top, in case someday he asks, "Was Dad ever there?" I folded each note, slipped it into an envelope, sealed it, and numbered it, then placed them all inside a wooden box. No lock, no hiding place. I left it on the bookshelf right below the Spider-Man comic Lucas used to read over and over. I didn't know if he would ever find it, but if he did, I wanted him to know. I never disappeared. I was waiting. Claire didn't call. I didn't reach out. I waited. Week 3, an email arrived. Scheduled visitation with Lucas, Saturday, 9 a.m. If not available, please respond by Thursday. No greeting. No "Lucas wants to see you." Just logistics. I stared at the screen for 5 minutes, then typed a single word. Okay. Saturday. I arrived at 8:58. Not early, not late. I didn't know if showing up early would seem too eager or too broken. The door opened. Claire didn't appear. Lucas stepped out, thinner hair longer, eyes deeper. He didn't smile, didn't flinch. He just looked at me as if trying to reconcile the person in front of him with someone he used to know. I didn't speak, didn't reach out, didn't hug. I only nodded. He nodded back. We walked around the nearby park. Neither of us spoke at first. He sat on the bench licking an ice cream cone. I sat beside him. I told him about an 8-year-old patient I'd recently operated on. A benign tumor, but the boy had a fear of needles. Lucas stayed quiet, but he looked at me directly. I shared more. How I once nearly dropped him carrying him up the stairs. How we had once eaten 8 popsicles on a scorching summer day. He didn't laugh, but he pulled one hand out of his pocket, placed it beside mine. I didn't grab it, didn't close the gap. I just let my hand stay there, close enough. So if he wanted to reach, it would be his choice. He didn't hold it, but he didn't pull away either. Before we parted, Lucas pulled a folded piece of paper from his backpack. I drew this. I unfolded it, a pencil drawing. 2 figures sitting side by side on a bench. No faces, only hands, close but not quite touching. Above them, in blocky child handwriting. Just because someone doesn't speak doesn't mean they don't remember. Some people stay, in ways no one sees. I folded the paper again, pressed it to my chest. Didn't say thank you, didn't say anything, because some things don't need words. That night, I placed the drawing in the wooden box, on top of the letters. Didn't label it, didn't mark the date, just let it be. Since then, I don't expect to see Lucas every weekend. I don't demand more than I'm offered. I live like someone who's been handed a second chance, not to rewrite history, but to make fewer mistakes moving forward. I clean his room, not in hope, but in readiness. I change the sheets each month. Place a glass of water by the bedside, not because I know he'll return, but because being a father,